I've been at Penn State for 30 years, and over that period of time, I've built up a research lab with approximately 15 people in it, and I have trained them to work on the whole spectrum of testing of new antibacterial agents against resistant organisms, mechanisms of resistance, new mechanisms of resistance in bacteria, etc. Drug resistance is developed, first of all, because of the overuse of antibiotics, certainly. Second of all, because even if you use antibiotics properly, an organism is going to become resistant to that as surely as day follows night. It's just a question of if you use the drug carefully, it's going to take longer to develop. But there is almost no such thing as a bacteria that doesn't develop resistance to a drug, whether you use it carefully or non-carefully. And the second thing is that the spread of the organisms, like in the daycare centers or with hand washing, as careful as you are, if you have one organism that spreads like that and it spreads all over, it's almost impossible to get rid of that resistance pattern. Okay, the challenges with drug resistance are very simple. Bacteria have been around for what, 40 billion years, and they know much more about adaptation and evolution than we do. Antibiotics have only been around since the end of the Second World War, and because of various factors, the pipeline of new antibacterials is dry. I foresee almost nothing getting approved in the next 6 or 7 years, meaning a whole generation is going to pass where during which bacteria are going to become much more resistant than they are now, and during which there are going to be no drugs to treat these organisms. Drug resistant bacteria everywhere, just a few examples. In the intensive care unit, organisms called gram-negative organisms, Acinetobacter, Pseudomonas, Enterobacteriaceae, infect patients, and they have now become resistant to absolutely everything. There's an organism in New York City that causes infection in hospital patients called the KPC, Klebsiella pneumoniae. And the only treatment possible for that organism is a drug called polymyxin that was going out the door 40 years ago when I was a student because of toxicity. So that we've still got to use that now because there's absolutely nothing else. Another example, otitis media caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae. We all know how common that is in babies, especially in daycare centers. Now, this is something I've been involved with, of course, since 1977. There was a vaccine approved several years ago which was supposed to remove this problem, a vaccine given to babies to prevent these drug-resistant strep pneumonia from infecting babies and also adults. Last year, they started reporting patients infected with a type of pneumococcus not in the vaccine and resistant to every drug known that is approved by the FDA. In other words, these babies get this otitis media and they cannot be treated with any single antibiotic approved by the FDA. There are a couple that they get treated with, they're not ideal, and this type is going to spread, not only in the US, but all over the world where this vaccine is used. And we know that when babies go into daycare centers, the daycare centers act as incubators for bacterial resistance. And once that resistance type is in the daycare center, you will never be able to get rid of it. The MRSAs. Now, MRSAs have been around with us for a very long time, but they've become much more of a problem lately due to several factors. First of all, the community-acquired MRSA that causes infection in people that engage in contact sports, such as football and wrestling, etc., cause very bad abscesses. And secondly, they can cause very severe pneumonia, which can be fatal in a day or two, especially after influenza virus. Sooner or later, we're going to get an influenza outbreak. When we do, Staph aureus is quite a common secondary bacterial infection of the lung after a primary infection with influenza A. And these organisms are also becoming more resistant because not only are they resistant to quinolones, but they're also becoming resistant to drugs, the new drugs that we've got now for them, and there's almost nothing to take their place. The MRSA is so dangerous because an organism that's spread by hand contact, with the planes that we have and the travel that we have all over the world, we're going to have clones all over the world. That's what happened with the pneumococcus. 5 or 6 clones in the early 1990s spread all over the world, resistant clones, and colonized the entire world. And that's why the vaccine was found to inhibit these clones. But again, the organism found a way to counteract the vaccine by multiplying one clone which was not inhibited by the vaccine. But the only other way with the MRSA is the old tried and trust method that was discovered by Semmelweis in the mid-19th century. And he was laughed at for 40 years until bacteria were really found by Lister and Pasteur, is hand washing, hand washing, hand washing, and again hand washing. That cannot be emphasized too much. Don't share towels, don't share whirlpool baths unless they're properly brominated or chlorinated. Don't have contact with other people's dirty sweaters. But again, that's a nice thing to say, but people are going to forget about washing their hands. The same thing as in the hospital cross infections of the type that I've been talking about, the very resistant ones, are also caused because of neglect to wash the hands. And it's very important to realize that there are only 2 reasons why we are living longer than the 35 years that was the norm, say, in the 18th or early 19th century. What are these reasons? First of all, general anesthesia that allowed the surgeon to cut deeper and to do a proper job. And second of all, antibacterials that stop the wounds getting septic. If you take one of those away, you do it at your own risk. The trends that I've seen are very simple: much more resistance and no antibiotics. It's terribly worrying, and it cannot be overemphasized. Again, I'm a dodo. Once I'm dead, there are going to be no more dodos on the island of Mauritius.